want to move on to our keynote. Ted Diers, we'd like to really welcome him back because he was the keynote at our first SALT Summit back in 2015. The work that he's done up in the state of New Hampshire, really leading as administrator of their Division of Water, has really set the pace and where we've turned a lot to get ideas. I always like digging up interesting facts, and it's good to know that Ted actually has a history in film starring in environmental films. Really on a recent documentary on dam removal, which will be shown, I think, at the New Hampshire Film Festival, as well as a film celebrating Earth Day. And he brings that passion, and will show that to us right here, talking about the protection of waters. So without further ado, Ted Diers.
Thanks, Chris. Green button, excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be back in Lake George. And thanks for ordering up a truly spectacular fall day for me. I really do appreciate that. And we'll get into this and get through it so you can get out and enjoy a little bit of this glorious day. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the culture of salt. So I think about this problem a little bit differently maybe than others because I've been involved in it for quite a while now. And what I see about me and what I see here going on today is that you all are solving some incredibly interesting and difficult problems. And it's not just a technology problem. It is truly an inherently people problem. It is inherently a cultural problem. And what is our culture made up of? Our culture is made up of not one thing. Our culture is made up of lots of things. And if we're not addressing all of those different aspects, you can't truly solve a problem. And that's where I want to talk a little bit about today, and talk a little bit about where the efforts going on here, the amazing work that you all are doing, fits into a larger context of the national salt culture problem. So let's jump into this, and we'll just have a little bit of fun, and we'll get through this, and then we'll get to our panel, and we can really start to dig in on some other interesting issues. Random 80s reference has to happen every time I speak, but culture. So what is it about the culture of salt? What are those aspects about the culture of salt that must be addressed in order for us to make a change? And it's not just a change here. It's got to be a change across the snow belt. And these are some of those things. There are policies. And great for the senator to be here today to talk about some of the policy issues. I'm going to talk at the end of this about the national policy issues that we need to bring up. This is a national issue. Science, we're going to dig into some more science. The doctors were here this morning, and they gave us some great presentations. We're going to dive into that a little bit. We're going to talk about technology, because that's super fun to look at trucks. The only thing politicians like more than babies, maybe, is a brand new, shiny truck to stand next to. We're going to talk about cultural expectation, because I think that this is really, truly, at the end of the day, it's the public expectation which is driving all of our work here. We're going to talk about accountability, because accountability is incredibly important. It's great that Phil is here. This is Phil's mantra. Those of you know Phil Sexton. It's all about the accountability. You can't manage what you don't measure, right? And finally, communication. So I'm going to talk about culture, and I'm going to talk about different definitions of culture and how we think about this. This is sort of, there's a cultural aspect of art to all of this. Snow is beautiful, people, right? Snow is amazing. We love it. We roll around in it, especially if you happen to be a golden retriever or a child, right? We should be embracing that. What you all are doing when you're out there clearing the streets is more than science. You're absorbing all of this all the different senses around you what you see, what you feel, the measurements coming into your truck, the feel of the steering wheel in your hands. This is the art of de-icing, right? It's not just a science. It's not just driving a truck. There's an art to it. We need to embrace that. This is part of the changing the culture within our DPWs and our contractors. Embracing that. We should embrace the art of salt, right? We've got the Wałęsa salt mines in Poland. I've been to it. It's in Krakow. And they have all these statues made out of salt. This poor guy at the bottom is just bemoaning the fact that we can't reduce our salt use. The guy up there that's making artwork out of salt, looks like a black velvet painting you'd see. But yeah. And then, humor. Where's the humor in all of this? Is that not part of our human culture? Is that not part of who we are? Is there not emotion that should be brought into this? And truly, what we're talking about is how do we change the cultural expectations around us? I love this quote from Shakespeare. Probably, if you are married or have ever been in a relationship, I would suggest that this probably describes every difficult moment in that relationship. The same is true between people and their environment. In the people in the built environment, there's an expectation. 100 years it's taken us to get from one of these to the other, right? And yet the expectation now is that this simply isn't enough, right? We need more. It needs to be clear. It's our God-given right as Americans to get to Walmart, regardless of what the conditions are, regardless of what time of day. This is not Russia. This is America, right? So the expectation is extremely high that you can wear penny loafers and go out in this weather and everything is going to be just fine. This is the expectation. I'm sorry to have to tell you this. This is the parking lot of the Department of Environmental Services, where I work. This is the view from my office. Do you see the green grass? This is like May. I don't know. Probably April. So this should not be happening. And what the hell is this? Right? When did it become okay for a sidewalk to crunch? When did that get to be okay? It didn't used to be that way. 30 years ago, it wasn't like that. Why do we have so much stinking salt going down in our parking lots and on our sidewalks? Because it's become a cultural expectation. A cultural expectation. So what do we do about it? Let's shame them. We all know that shaming works really well. So there's, should we be doing salt shaming? Should we be calling people out? I know in New York you've had issues with soft drink shaming, right? You can't have the large soft drinks. I don't know if that's worked or not. Would salt shaming work? I don't know, but these are some of the things that people are playing with now because we have the technologies, we have these abilities to be able to point out, to bring it to people's awareness that there's no way that you need that much salt to be safe. Culture is also about how the training that we have, the education, the understanding of technologies and the ability to use them. These are all things you heard about today. All the things that have been talked about, the great things that's going on. It's that knowledge and experience, right? I grew up in Colorado, and we always used to joke that the N on the Cornhuskers helmet stood for knowledge. But no, we're talking about real knowledge, the knowledge that's hard fought, the knowledge that comes from everyone trying to understand this stuff, learning from each other. And if you don't measure it, it ain't happening, right? So this is a graph. This is the New Hampshire DOT. Some people were talking about how do you measure, get the data from the DOT to understand what it means. This is that data. These are the various different salt sheds in the southern part of New Hampshire on I-93. I-93 is the road that connects Boston up to our lovely lakes and ski mountains. not unlike probably this part of the state. And you can see that in about 2007 is when they began implementing brine and implementing, in a serious way, salt reduction activities. The question is you look at this, you tell me, are we getting any better? Are we using less salt? I don't know. The graph up there is the winter severity index. Somebody asked about winter severity index this morning. This all has to be taken in context. How do we understand the impacts of the winters potentially getting worse? There's a curve through there that's actually statistically significant. So we see that the weather's getting worse, probably more ice, less deep snow. And so are we actually using less salt, or are we simply keeping up with climate effects? These are some of the really important questions that need to be answered. The answer is that they've actually reduced salt about 20%. So I think that that's good to know, but it's really hard to track. And I would just put this out there, is that it's so much easier to track best management practices than it is to track grains of salt. The good work that the doctors were doing this morning is excellent and needs to happen, but ultimately, in the short run, being accountable to the actual things you're doing is much more important than tracking every grain of salt. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our program in our state and sort of how are we trying to get to salt reduction. So if you're trying to grow bacteria, you grow it in an agar, that's that media. And so the media that we've chosen in order to try to grow salt reduction in New Hampshire is limited liability relief. We started doing training, we started getting people involved and understanding the problems, and our program has always been, and it still is, focused on private contractors. It is a salt applicator focused program on the commercial salt applicator. We chose that because when we did our research in the southern part of the state, we found that well over 50% of the salt that was going into the waterways, which were impaired, these are waterways that have chlorides higher than 230. We have one that it's higher than 230, 120 days out of the year. That's a lot of salt. That's like growing tilapia salt. So we heard from the contractors that the reason they couldn't reduce salt usage was because they were worried about getting sued. They were worried about slip and fall cases. I know I've done this exercise for New Hampshire. If you Google slip and fall attorneys, the Google pages go on for a long time. My guess is that if you Google slip and fall attorneys in New York State, you'd be reading for the rest of your life before you got to the end of that list. So it's a real concern. So what we did was we implemented a law that was based on the liability protections afforded to ski areas. So the legislature realized that skiing is an inherently dangerous sport, right? Putting slick boards on the bottom of your feet and going really fast through trees has some inherent danger to it. So ski areas, as long as they're not negligent, as long as they don't, put metal poles in the middle without pads on them or something like that, if you go up and break your leg, you can't really sue them because you had slick boards on the bottom of your feet. Well, kind of the same is true with winter, right, in New England and New York. Sorry. We get a little snobby about New England, but we say New England and New York. So the idea is that if you are doing a good job and you have cleared your parking lot and it's safe and you've cleared the snow off and it's in good condition, and you happen to use less salt to do that, it shouldn't make you liable, right? It shouldn't make you more open, more susceptible, more in risk of your business being impacted by a lawsuit. So that's what our program is really about. So what the Green Snow Pro program is about, it's a voluntary certification that you can get. You go through some training, you take a test, you track your salt, you report to us, you pay a fee, we are the government, and you get, in exchange for that, limited liability relief that essentially says if you're doing a good job and you've had your training and you're not negligent, you can't be sued. That's what the law says. But because we're talking about laws, I also had to give you a dad's joke to take home with you today. Did you know that in New Hampshire it's illegal to mix sodium chloride and magnesium chloride? Yeah, it's called aggregated assault. So the question, my friends, is does it work, right? This is the $64,000 question. Does it work? And I don't know. It's a mixed bag. Here's what we're hearing. We've had 30 or 40 slip and fall cases involving certified green snow pros over the last 5 or 6 years. People are getting sued, that's for sure. We know that in some cases, as soon as the other side has learned that they are Green Snow Pro certified, that they have withdrawn some cases. We know that that's true. That's great. We also know it's true that some cases have not been thrown out. They should be summarily dismissed if everyone agrees that the Green Snow Pro was certified, right? Because that's the way the law reads. That's how it should go down. But we know that the courts are not doing that. And I guess I understand it. Judges are there to protect everyone, right? And especially an alleged victim. So they're going to afford that alleged victim every possibility to be able to get redress for their pain and suffering. That is how the court system is built. That's how judges are trained. That's why this has been really challenging. There's also super clever trial attorneys who try to find loopholes in all of this. We just went back to our legislature in the last session to plug a couple of those loopholes because we're trying to stay one step ahead of the trial attorneys, which is very challenging. So does it work? We know that insurance companies are starting to require the people that they cover to be Green Snow Pro certified. We hope that this is helping to keep rates from rising dramatically in our state. And we think that there's maybe some evidence of that. We think that it's helping some contractors to keep their insurance, which is really a challenge for some contractors. So I think that there are some benefits. But the primary benefit is that it's that agar that we're growing the bacteria in, is that it brings people to the table. It creates champions. It creates real believers who have taken their companies, even tiny companies, to use liquids. It's taken the large companies, the really big ones, the ones with 300, 400 trucks, to reduce their salt usage by 50%. That's a lot of salt. And ultimately, we hope that we'll measure the change in water quality. And I just pose this question to you all because I think I know the answer. What's your media? What's your agar that you're growing salt reduction in? I think what I heard is it's the love of this beautiful resource, right? That's the emotion. That's that intangible thing which will bring people to the table and which you all, and I said this to the folks from Albany radio when they were interviewing me outside. I don't know, I am sort of a collector of really good salt reduction examples around the country. It's kind of what I do. I love it. And there's great people doing great things. But I believe you are truly unique. I believe you are truly unique in the way that you have joined together around a single resource that everyone loves, that is certainly threatened, and you have the science to show that. But you also have a business imperative that you've sort of somehow you bottled something really interesting here that I don't know of another place on the planet that's happening quite like this, in which you've gotten your municipalities and your businesses and your environmental group, and you have tourists and you have everybody else that is sort of rowing in the same direction. That's you have something here. You have this passion for this issue that I that is, I believe that's your media that you're growing this in. And I want to make sure that you keep that going because it's really amazing. And I would also point out that it is now incumbent upon you to share this with the world. Other people need to do this. Other people need to know how this works. So bottling this up and shipping it elsewhere, I'm going to be talking about you guys all the time. I speak all over the country. I was just speaking with Maryland and Virginia. Okay, Maryland and Virginia, we don't even think that they have snow compared to here, right? No, what they got is ice. They got worse than snow. Their application rates are enormous compared to ours. And finally, I want to talk, let's just finish with some science. Because I'm in a science agency. This is the stuff that I love. This is why I come to bear. And you can see this is the same kind of chart that was shown in a little bit different format, that we have our problems in the middle of summer. That's when we have our highest rates. We've seen pictures like this that show that you can be successful, that you can spray a little brine, you can do some other things to help that will actually reduce your salt usage, and maybe not have to do so much hours on poor humans in the middle of the night, right? That certainly wears people down. This is the big kahuna, drinking water. You think lake water makes people passionate. The stuff people drink really makes them passionate. This is in Merrimack, New Hampshire. This is one of their wells that they just took offline because of chlorides. This is a major municipal water supply. And you can see that this is going sky high, up to 400 milligrams per liter. The EPA has their limit at 250, right? This is bad for people with heart disease. Do you see the report that just came out yesterday? It says that Americans got to cut their salt usage by 12%. The whole country and the parts of the land we live on need to go on a low-salt diet, right? So do you know what it costs to develop a new municipal well? It's millions of dollars. So this is the kind of challenging stuff. And I will tell you that at least one of the pictures that I showed you of oversalting in this presentation was from this watershed. These are solvable problems. This is Lake Sunapee, which looks a little bit like, maybe like Lake George. And Lake Sunapee is very, very clear. And you can see that we've had a doubling of our specific conductivity since 1986 when we started measuring. This is Cobbett's Pond, a little bit different environment. That is a major interchange on I-93. And you can see what's happened since the, again, mid-'80s, a doubling. And these are starting to get to numbers that may soon violate our water quality standards. This will take a super long time to clean up, like maybe forever, because the ground is saturated with salt. And the turnover of this lake is not particularly fast, but that groundwater will take really, really long time. This is the sharing part. No one has all the answers. While I might sort of seem like it, I don't know every damn thing. My wife will tell you that. There are great work going on around the country. We stole the training program. Actually, we collaborated with them from the Smarters About Salt Council up in Ontario. They actually operate our online training program. Great partnership. There's the swim, which you've already been familiar with, which is an amazing revelation of it's not about the product, it's about the process. And that's, I think, great stuff. With the stuff you guys are doing, Wisconsin Saltwise, the amazing work that's gone on in Minnesota. And now that other states are getting into this, they're going to come up with their own innovations. And sharing them is incredibly important. Learning from overseas. Germany passed a law that requires snow tires on all cars during the winter. Sweden, they're using brushes, recycling sand all during the winter. There are things we can learn from other places around the world as well. And finally, I want to talk about a federal role. This is a list of things that my good friend Brooke from Minnesota and I came up with because she's talking to her federal senators. And I'm going and talking to Senator Shaheen and Senator Hassan from New Hampshire. And I've been distributing this to my other friends in other states. Perhaps New York has a couple of senators that might be interested in something like this. These are specific things that a federal role can do. These are specific things that we need to help with from the feds. And one of the key ones is getting a federal leadership role at EPA. They are mostly absent from this conversation. And anyone who's interested in this, and anyone who's interested in talking to your senators, I would love to chat with you about strategy and about how we get their staffs together, because it's really the 20-somethings in DC that run everything. Finally, thinking about the future. This is not a static problem. You folks are doing amazing work, but the problem is changing as you're solving it. What do we know about what's coming up? Chloride standards are changing. We're going to have to change the way that we actually measure salt in order to use regulatory approaches to address some of them. What happens when we have hydrogen cars? You know what comes out of the tailpipe of a hydrogen car? Water. That's the waste product from hydrogen cars. What will that do to our salting problem? So the whole move to self-driving vehicles and the move away from big box retail, what does that mean for us? How do we get out ahead of that related to how we're going to operate our transportation system and our winter maintenance? Are there opportunities in this out of COVID to capture some of the focus on remote work? And what about climate change when your climate looks more like, shall we say, Virginia than it does New York, and they have ice instead of snow? What does that mean? How do we change the way that we're solving these problems given the world changing around us? These are some of the things that need to be thought of as we move forward. This is Frenchie the Frog. Freshie the Frog. This is Freshie the Frog. And I like this idea of us taking pictures of Freshie where people have oversalted and posting them. And I think Freshie could lead the way to changing some of the culture, along with everyone in this room, all pulling the same direction. You are doing amazing, amazing work. Thank you for having me here today.